China controlling the world's narrative on the COVID pandemic from the very start is the topic of today's show. It is a tale of censorship, suppression, and outright lies, something that has become par for the course for the communist empire. And so from Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and our episode is starting right now. So, the world's focus on China because of the COVID pandemic has not been a welcome event for the Asian nation, who has been striving to become the #1 economy and world power. As recently as late December 2022, reports out of China claimed that the country was overwhelmed with the epidemic, news which the Chinese government has sought to suppress. You see, since the outbreak of the virus in Wuhan 3 years ago, the country imposed draconian measures to quell the virus. The situation would get so bad for the Chinese people that with the emergence of a more transmissible strain that led to further municipal lockdowns led to widespread politically inspired protests. The CCP responded to the immense internal pressure and finally eased restrictions on the population of 1.4 billion. Which naturally, after years of isolation, the sudden movement of the citizens caused the country to experience a huge outbreak of COVID, and the Chinese medical system would then become overwhelmed. China's hospitals were in many cases already overcrowded and underfunded, but now with the COVID outbreak running rampant, the Chinese medical system was being pushed to its limits. Importantly, China's medical system, apart from the propaganda, is highly unequal, with rich urban centers enjoying high-quality medical experiences, but poorer outlying regions suffering from overstretched capacity. And out in the rural areas, the situation can be even worse. And if that wasn't enough, the situation had gotten so bad, apparently the hospitals had stopped testing doctors for COVID and were simply allowing physicians to work without knowing if they're positive for the disease. And of course, the government not only opted to step back and let go of the lockdowns, but also the mandatory testing as well. And so you see, it would become a disaster. But the thing with communist countries is the truth often becomes hard to see. For example, reportedly the Chinese Health Commission underreported COVID deaths by an astonishing amount. Back in January of 2022, Forbes reported that China's official statistics understated the Chinese COVID death rate by 17,000%. This according to The Economist's model. In fact, based on excess mortality calculations, The Economist estimated that the true number of COVID deaths in China is not 4,636, but something like 1.7 million. That is, China's cumulative death toll is likely at least double that of the United States. In the case of China, it is clearly intentional. The COVID death figures are being grossly, one might say crudely, manipulated by the Chinese authorities. And in fact, in December of 2022, during the height of their Omicron wave, estimates of as many as 5,000 people per day in China were dying because of the tsunami of cases. Naturally, of course, as the CCP had stopped tracking COVID patients, the government also stopped releasing daily figures for infections and deaths from the disease. Not that their numbers were ever trustworthy to begin with. And now a press freedom group is reporting that China is the biggest global jailer of journalists, with over 100 reporters currently behind bars. The group, Reporters Without Borders, claims that China's leader Xi Jingping is conducting a crusade against journalism. Additionally, China has what is regarded as the world's most extensive system of internet controls. Its filters try to block the Chinese public from seeing overseas websites operated by news outlets, governments, and human rights and other activist groups. Chinese reporters have been prosecuted on charges of espionage, leaking national secrets, and starting quarrels, which is a vague accusation used to jail dissidents. Other journalists are subjected to surveillance, intimidation, and harassment. And now it appears that the Chinese government is moving to control the narrative. A recent article in the New York Times claimed that Chinese censorship is quietly trying to rewrite the COVID-19 story. According to the article, the Chinese government has muzzled scientists, hindered international investigations, and censored online discussion of the pandemic. The article points out that in February of 2020, on the same day that the illness was named COVID-19, a report was released by both US and Chinese scientists showing how quickly the virus was spreading and who was dying. The report was cited in a health warning around the world, but was pulled within days with an online message telling scientists not to cite it. As one of the study authors said, it was so hard to get any information out of China. There was so much covered up and so much hidden. The Chinese government's censorship campaign has targeted international journals and scientific databases, preventing the sharing of data. Chinese scientists, under pressure from the government, have withheld information, withdrawn genetic sequences from public databases, and altered crucial details in journal submissions. According to the Times, Western journal editors have also enabled this by agreeing to the edits imposed by the Chinese government and withdrawing papers for muddled reasons. The World Health Organization has allowed this practice without question. In other words, they accepted the behavior of the Chinese government. This self-imposed censorship was revealed recently when an international group of scientists discovered a genetic sequence the Chinese covered up. It was data Chinese scientists had collected from the Wuhan market in January of 2020, linking the coronavirus to the raccoon dog. According to the Times, the Chinese government has no specific agenda in the jailing of journalists, and scientists feel it is just stifling the truth. Edward Holmes, a University of Sydney biologist who was part of the group that analyzed the sequences containing raccoon dog DNA, said this: "I think there is a major political agenda that is impacting the science." This continued censorship and stifling of data simply allowed the Chinese government to control the narrative and keep the origin of the COVID virus a mystery. Which brings us back to the World Health Organization, who has also essentially participated in the effort by the Chinese government by never challenging their version of events leading to the pandemic. In the meantime, the United States has continued its investigation into the origins of the coronavirus, which will inevitably become political. Just last month, scientists approved by the Chinese government claimed it is time to search for the origins of the COVID pandemic elsewhere. Perhaps that deflection is the point of the censorship by the Chinese. As we here at Trial Site News have reported very early on in the pandemic, in our article titled China's Response to COVID-19, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, early on as the novel coronavirus emerged, it became apparent that censorship would become the norm, not the exception in China. Importantly, while local authorities, likely directed by higher-ups, directed lockdowns locally like in Wuhan, numerous flights were allowed, sending people likely infected to land and spread the contagion worldwide. And early on, we here at Trial Site News observed strange behavior such as strong jingoistic language emanating from the Chinese media. At the time, we asked why such an ethos was embraced during the start of the pandemic. A global crisis. It should have been a time that different influential nations would come together to solve the problems with such collective impact. Sadly, that wasn't the COVID-19 experience. And instead, as history has now shown us, Chinese-style censorship spread rapidly to the West during this crisis, something that sadly our masters in public office here in the West took to with glee. And so here we are, 3 years later. Freedoms and rights of countless millions of citizens in Western countries have been greatly diminished, a dark trend for the future of humanity. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. For more content like this, be sure to check back to this channel daily, Monday through Friday, or for written content published every day, 7 days a week, feel free to visit us at trialsitenews.com. And as always, my friends, thank you so much for joining me on the program today. From Trial Site News, I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.